Welcome back to Small Step Finance. Today we're going to be talking about the financial independence retire early movement. Maybe you've asked yourself before, could I retire before 65? Or how much would I need to retire early? You may have even heard of the financial independence retire or FIRE movement, where people try to retire earlier on an amount of money and be able to not have to work until they're 65. Here at Small Step Finance, our mission is to help you learn the skills so that you can build your wealth one small step at a time. Let's dive into the financial independence retire early movement, and let's see if you can retire early too. So of course, many of us want to retire before we're 65, but how do you get there, and what does that look like for someone who's starting out today? So when I think about the financial independence retire early movement, I think about how can I retire before 65? Now, some people think that the financial independence retire early movement is all about retiring in your 30s or 40s. And sure, that would be great if you could do that, but that's not realistic for everybody. And so when I think about the FIRE movement, what I see is an opportunity to retire before 65, even if that means retiring at 60 or 55. And that's where I think there's value in thinking about how can you shorten that amount of time between when you are working today in terms of when you can retire. And so we'll get into the weeds about what that looks like for you and how we can break that down, and also look at what does that mean in terms of the steps you need to take to build your wealth in a way that can allow you to retire before you're 65. So let's dive into some of the numbers, and let's dive into a few examples on what FIRE might look like and what are some of the barriers that you might need to overcome in order to be able to retire earlier. So if you're interested in the FIRE movement, it's not really about sitting on a beach drinking a cocktail or playing golf all the time. It's really about reaching a point where you are financially able to become work optional. You're able to choose whether you want to work full-time or part-time or not at all. And that's where the financial independence movement really allows for the flexibility for you to choose what makes sense for you financially and allows you to scale back in areas around work that you may want to, and it's your choice. It's not your employer's choice in terms of when you can retire or how long you're going to need to work. It becomes your power and your control. And that's where the financial independence movement really gets a lot of interest, is the idea that you can grow your income and cut back on expenses to a point where you no longer need to be able to work, and you can choose when you want to retire at a date and time that works for you. There are 4 things that you're going to have to think about in order for you to set yourself up for success for FIRE. First, you're going to have to start planning for retirement, thinking about what types of accounts, how much money you're going to need, what's your tax situation going to look like, are there going to be opportunities for you to pass on generational wealth to those after you. Second, you're going to have to think about how you manage your expenses. Are you going to maintain your expenses that you're having today, or are you going to have to inflate those expenses in 10, 20, 30 years from now? Third, you're going to have to think about ways for you to boost your income today. So are you going to have to go and ask for that pay raise at your job or that promotion at your primary job? Or are you going to have to look for an opportunity outside of your job where you can boost your income with a side job or side gig? The fourth thing that you're going to have to really prioritize is trying to prioritize how you manage your money. You're going to have to make sure that you're saving and investing, and it's going to have to become very normalized for you to do it every single month in a way that will help you meet and achieve your FIRE goals. So what's an easy way to calculate your FIRE number? Essentially what you will do is you will take your expected annual expenses and you will multiply that by 25. That will give you your FIRE number, the number that you need to target in order for you to retire. Now, personally, I like to use inflation adjusted numbers to calculate what the real actual number will look like so that you have a more appropriate number for your FIRE number. Instead of just taking today's annual expenses and multiplying it by 25 to get the number that is the FIRE number, I take that and then I enter it into an inflation calculator to really get a better feel for what my real target number should be. Now that we've calculated FIRE, let's take a look at this chart, which gives you a rough idea of what the annual expense would look like based on what you would need. So let's say you wanted $100,000 a year. You would need roughly $2.5 million. But again, as I've mentioned before, the key here is what is the impact of inflation. If you assume that there is no inflation when you retire, so maybe you're retiring next year and you think there's going to be minimal to no inflation, then these numbers are totally fine. But if you're going to be retiring in 20, 30 years, the odds of inflation rising are very, very high. And so if that's the case for you, you will need to adjust these numbers up quite a bit, depending upon how far out you look. The other thing I'll mention when you're looking at these numbers, these give you a rough idea of what you need to target. So $2.5 million, you may say, look, that's a great target, but I want some extra buffer. So my real target is going to be $3 million before inflation adjustment. This really just is designed to give you a quick tip on how you can develop your own financial strategy to figure out what makes sense for you to retire. Once you hit this number, once you hit the 2.5 million or 3 million, in theory, you can live off this investment over the life of your retirement. That's where it's really important for you to understand that if you hit this number early, say in your 40s or 50s, you actually can be able to live off this number for the rest of your retirement, assuming that you're only going to take out a specific amount of money each year, roughly 4% of the portfolio based on inflation. So how do you actually calculate FIRE? Now here we're going to take an example. Let's look at Sarah. She thinks her expenses are going to be $40,000 a year in 2022 dollars, and she wants to see what it's going to look like when she wants to retire in 20 years. She is going to take her $40,000 and she's going to inflate it for 20 years at a 3% inflation rate. Based on that 3% inflation rate, she's actually going to need to spend $72,244, and it's going to be equivalent to today's $40,000. So when you take that $72,244 and you multiply it by the FIRE calculator number, which is 25, that actually means that she will need a portfolio size of $1.8 million when she retires in 20 years. So now she knows that she needs $1.8 million in 20 years to retire. But how much does she need to contribute today and through the next 20 years to get to $1.8 million? Now let's assume that she has $0 saved today and she's going to retire in 20 years. She will need to save $2,600 every single month for the next 20 years, compounded at 10% in order to hit $1.8 million. If you head to investor.gov, you'll be able to find a calculator that will help you calculate how much you need to be contributing every single month in order to reach your own FIRE number. Let's take a look at Joe. He's 28 years old and he has a professional job. He wants to be able to retire on $75,000 annually in his retirement account. And when you inflate that number, when he turns 60, he'll need an equivalent of $193,000 annually based on inflation percentage of 3%. Now, if you take that $193,000 and you multiply it by the FIRE calculator number, which is 25, that means that he will need an equivalent of $6.1 million when he is 60 years old in order to retire on the equivalent of $75,000 today. If you look at how much he needs to contribute every single month from today until 60, he will need to contribute $2,500 a month in order to be able to hit that $6.1 million. Now, if he thinks that the $6.1 million is too much, he can certainly go back into this calculation and he can reconfigure the numbers to meet his own particular needs. And that's where you can also try out using different calculators to see what makes sense for you. I've included some calculators below that make it easier for you to calculate your own FIRE number, and I hope that this will help you understand what you'll need to do in order to set yourself up for success to retire at the age that you wish to retire. Look, you may look at these numbers that you're calculating for yourself, and you may be terrified. You may think, there is no way for me to ever get to that number. There's no point in saving or investing for retirement. Well, I'm here to tell you that with the steps that I share with you in this video and other videos, you can start to build wealth, and you can look for opportunities for you to grow your wealth one small step at a time. I know that it can be intimidating. I know that there's a lot of jargon. I know that it can be very difficult, but I am here to help support you along the way. And I encourage you to check out all of my free content that basically gives you more insights on how you can become more financially independent and how you can learn how to become more financially ready for retirement. Do you have any questions that you think you need to have clarity on? Drop them below. Let's start a discussion and let's figure out how we can help you build your wealth one small step at a time. As I always like to remind you all, my job here is to help share information and insights to help you grow your wealth and to give you information that gives you actionable steps for you to be able to build your wealth one small step at a time. I encourage you to follow Small Step Finance on all of our social media platforms and to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it. And I encourage you to check out our next video. Thanks for joining. See you soon.